Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. We're back today with another video on my E30 Touring behind me here, and today we're actually going to be trying to fix the brake pad wear indicator which is stuck on my instrument cluster. Now, I've been doing a bit of research on this, and it seems like there's a resistor that can gradually come loose over time, which causes that light to come on and stay on, and that's pretty much what happened to me. I was out with the car, we were on some pretty bumpy country roads actually, and it just started to flicker on and off, and then by the end of the day it was basically stuck on all the time. So I'm pretty sure that's going to be the issue. I have checked all of the sort of sensors that plug into the pads and into the wiring loom, and everything seems fine there. I don't think anything's come loose. So we're going to start by taking the instrument cluster out, and then we'll see how things are looking. So the first step to do this is to basically remove this panel here that basically covers all the electronics underneath the instrument cluster, and from there there's a couple of screws that we need to loosen up. So first of all, I'm going to undo that. So to actually take this out, all you need to do is remove a few of these trim screws. You can see there's one there. Mine's actually got one missing here, but there will be one there, and I think there's another one just around here. Yep, just there. So you remove those. They're basically, they lock into place. I'll show you the type they are when we get this out, but you just kind of rotate them 90 degrees and that should slacken off, and then this whole thing should drop down. So it's pretty easy to do actually. You can see how it's loosened off there. And then we're just going to gradually pull this down, and that's basically it. You can see behind, that's the type of screws we've got. So they don't really thread in, but you just need to rotate them 90 degrees, and then they unlock and the whole thing's loose. So I think we basically just need to pull this back. Oh yeah, sorry, so there is actually one more screw under the bottom side of here. You can probably just see it there. It kind of screws into the steering column, so just get that. It's a Phillips head. That's it. See, that drops down much more now. So yeah, you can basically start to pull this out. You can see the headlight leveling system is the thing that catches it. So what I'm going to do is just unplug the two sort of bulbs there. Okay, so I've taken the bulbs out. You can now move this panel out of the way. I forgot actually there's this wiring. Well, I think these are actually vacuum lines for the headlight leveling system. So I'm just going to leave that in. Don't really want to start messing about with that, but that's all the access we should need, as the bolts that we need to get to are right up inside there. I'm going to try and get a light on here in a second, try and show you where those are. Okay, so the easiest way to describe where these screws are is basically directly behind this panel, probably about here. They just kind of, you have to reach up, they're pretty loose. Just undoing that now with my finger, it should drop out in a sec. There we go. So they just screw onto the back, and you just need to undo those. I think there should be one on the other side as well. Okay, so I've got both of those screws out now. The next thing you need to do is pry off this little bit of trim that runs across. One thing I've got to say at the start is some people will take off the steering wheel for this. It's not totally necessary, but if you want the extra space, it's probably worth doing. I'm going to try and get away without doing that. So you just need to carefully pry this all the way across. I think this one's probably been off before. Okay, just pull this out. And then that's what the piece of trim looks like. See, there's these like two screws on the back, which is where these thread onto, and then that reveals 6 screws. Don't know if we can zoom this in. So in the usual fashion, it looks like one of mine isn't there, but you can see over this side there is one, and then I think there's another one maybe down in there. So you can see there's another one up there, and it's the same on this side. There's one there, and then you've got these 2 screws up on the top of the cluster there. Okay, so I've removed all 6 of those screws, well, 5 of those screws in my case. And one thing I like about working on E30s is there's lots of little cubby holes where you can store screws while you're working on the interior, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, removing those 6 screws will allow us to basically remove the bezel. You can see that just slides out. Just do this quite carefully. And then now we're just left with the sort of raw cluster, and you can see there's a screw there, there's also a screw up there, and I think that might be all of them, but I will check back with you if there's any more. Okay, so now we've got those 2 screws removed, we can start to pull the cluster out carefully. You just want to do this kind of bit by bit. try not to catch anything. I think the easiest way is to probably fold this down, so I'm going to just turn the camera off for a sec while I do this. Okay, so once you've kind of pulled the cluster forward, you want to basically undo these plugs. There's one there. I think there's quite a big one at the bottom of the actual speedometer or rev counter, so I'm just going to gradually undo these and try and wiggle it out. Obviously you want to make sure you've got everything before you do pull it out, so just be sure to double check that. Okay, so you can see I've now got that out. My car is a facelift car, so I'm guessing this is why my connectors are slightly different. I basically just had this one on the left hand side, that's my left hand side, and then this one on the right hand side, and unplugged those and they came out. One thing I will point out is these have a little sort of release clip. You can see that you have to lift up first before you pry it out. Yeah, otherwise you'll damage the connector. So once you've got that, you can pull the cluster out and it should look something like this. So the next thing we're going to do is remove the backing cover so that we can get at the resistor. Okay, so once you've got the cluster out of the car, you just want to flip it over onto the back side. And we're going to remove these screws here. You can see there's one there, there's one there, there's one there. I'm assuming I'm meant to have one there as well. And then you can see there's one around this side, and one there, one here as well. And probably that one too. So we're going to remove those, and then hopefully this whole kind of thing will just pull out. Okay, so we've now got that totally separated, and you can see down here, I think from what I understand, there's a resistor that runs from here to that bit of solder there, and these connections can deteriorate over time. Apparently they weren't very good from the factory either, and basically once that comes loose or the connection gets damaged, you're going to get that warning light coming on. Now looking at mine a bit closer, I don't know how well you can see this, they actually don't look too bad to me. I suspect someone has possibly already resoldered that at some point in the car's history, just given by this sort of like little bit of residue around it. It kind of looks like it's possibly been redone. I might be wrong, but yeah, it's interesting. I was expecting, you know, to be able to see a bit more of what the issue might be, but you know, as far as I can tell, those joints don't look too bad. So I'm basically in two minds as to whether I should try and resolder it or whether just leave it as it is. It's a bit odd to me. I think I'm going to do a little bit more research into this, and I will check in with you a little bit later on. Okay guys, so you join me a little bit later on. I've been doing some research. I've also just been under the car again and checked the connections for each of the pad sensors. They seem absolutely fine to me, so it's unclear exactly what is causing this issue at the minute. It's possible it could be a problem in the loom somewhere. That seems unlikely given what happened. I think what's more likely is that it's probably a bad connection on the pad itself where the sensor actually plugs in which case there's probably not much I'm going to be able to do about it now unless I take all the brakes off, which I'm really not bothered about doing for the sake of a single light. I fitted these brakes and the pads and discs probably about 6 months ago, so do you know what, I'm not really that bothered about it. I was more or less just investigating to see if we could find what the issue was, and given that the cluster looks okay, I don't think there's anything I want to do there. Obviously all this stuff's quite delicate, and it's certainly not my forte when it comes to electronics, so I don't really want to mess about with it too much. If the connection looks fine, there's no movement on it at all, so I don't think soldering it's really going to make any difference at all, to be honest. So I think the next thing is I'm going to put this stuff back together, put it back in the car, and then there's a couple of other jobs I want to do on the E30. So one last thing I wanted to point out with this instrument cluster is you may have heard before about the brass nuts on the back of the fuel gauge and temp gauge, and basically these can work themselves loose over time, and it can cause the gauges to flicker, sort of like move up and down quite a bit. Now mine seem pretty tight, but I have just gone over there with a 7mm box wrench and just nipped them up. They was just ever so slightly loose, so hopefully that should stop them from backing out any further, and this thing is now ready to go back in the car. Okay, so I've got everything put back in place now. Literally installing it again is the reverse of taking it out, so it's very, very straightforward to do. Probably took me about 10 minutes. Now what I'm going to do is start this thing up and just double check everything is still working. So obviously you can see everything seems to be working. We've still got that brake pad warning light on. As I said before, I think this could be possibly related to one of the sensors actually on the brake pad. as opposed to anything on the cluster or in the actual connection. So yeah, not to worry, it's not a huge deal, it doesn't really bother me that much, and to be honest, when you're driving it out in the daylight, you can barely even see the light anyway, so no big deal. Anyway, as I said, there's a couple of other things I want to do, so I'll just let you know what those are. So one of these things is this rear mud flap. Now, we were out filming the other day. That's on my main channel, Foot to Pedal. I'll leave a link below if you're interested in that. We've got lots of stuff on this car. And anyway, I was going down some country roads. May have been going a little bit too fast, and we bottomed out a little bit. And basically, there's a little cable tie holding this on. I'm not exactly sure how it was held on from factory. It kind of looks like possibly this mount was used, but yeah, maybe it's just broken off. This is quite brittle rubber at this point. These are sort of 32-year-old mud flaps, so the rubber is quite brittle, and it basically just snapped that cable tie straight off. So it's been hanging down a little bit. So what I've done is, you can see there was a bit of a crack down there where the kind of rubber had just split open, so I've glued that back together, and what I'm going to do is just basically re-cable tie it on. There's two holes here. I'm going to wrap the cable tie through those holes and around this, which is how it was before, and it should hold it up something like that. And you know, that fitment's absolutely fine, no issues there. That's actually how the other side is done, and it seems to work pretty well. So I'm just going to get a new cable tie and do that now. Okay, so there we go, new cable tie fitted, and the mud flap is brought back into its normal position, and that works absolutely fine for me. Don't really need to overcomplicate this. They are just mud flaps. So anyway, that's those back together. Now the next thing I was going to look at is basically to do with a couple of very, very small rust spots that have appeared that look like they've kind of started from stone chips. Now, this car is original paint, at least for the most part. The paint really isn't great. You could do with a full respray at some point, but to be honest, I don't want to dump, you know, $4 into this thing on paint when there's lots of other things that can be done in the meantime. The car mechanically is fine at the minute. There will be some things that I do go through in the future. For example, the suspension's going to need a refresh at some point. You know, that kind of thing. So I don't really want to spend loads of money on cosmetic stuff when that money could be better spent on mechanical things. Either way, a respray will happen at some point, I'm sure, just not quite yet. So anyway, I'll give you a close-up of these kind of spots that are appearing, and we'll take a closer look. Okay, so we're just looking at the rear side of the sunroof there, and you can see there's one spot there, and then just slightly further up, there's another spot there. As I say, these look like stone chips, where the paint has kind of just been chipped off and it's allowed it to start rusting. Now, there's quite a lot of that on this car. There's been various little stone chips that I've repaired, you know, there's a couple on the front there. So basically what I'm going to do, again, nothing too crazy. All I'm going to do is treat the rust with a rust converter, and I've actually got some colour match touch-up paint, which I'm going to basically just layer over the top of that to protect it. As I say, this is really just a short-term fix until I get this thing resprayed, but I'm not going to go crazy, you know, sanding everything back and putting multiple layers of paint on. You know, at the end of the day, this is original paint. It's quite difficult to colour match it anyway. So the best thing to do for this car eventually is going to be a full respray, and that will come in the years to follow, I believe. So for now, I'm just going to get out the rust converter, I'm going to roll the sunroof back and treat those two spots. Okay, so I've retracted the sunroof there just to give a bit more access, but you can see I've put some of that rust converter on each of the kind of 2 or 3 spots there. It's not quite in focus, but you get the idea. I'm going to have to leave that a while before it's a paintable surface, but the thing I use is just literally this Hammerite Co-Rust rust converter. Seems to work pretty well. I've used it on quite a few spots, and you know, this might seem a little bit excessive, but at the end of the day, I think anyone that's owned an old car will know just how quickly rust can spread. And although it's just a couple of spots now, later on this could all bubble under the paint and eventually spread into the full roof skin, and it is as easy as that. So it's better to kind of stop these things early, patch them up while you can, at least until I get this thing resprayed. So yeah, hopefully that should do the job. I'll leave this a little while to kind of dry and convert the rust, and then we can put a little bit of paint on it to cover it up. So it's a couple of hours later now, which means I'm going to be good to paint on this treated areas. Now I'm just going to get the paint ready, and then we'll start applying it. Now this is the paint I'm going to be using. I got it from cartouchuppaints.co.uk. It seems like a pretty good match. It's in 0203, which is lac silver metallic. So yeah, it seems pretty good so far. As I said before, I've actually touched up a few places, you know, various stone chips and things. So yeah, I'm going to open this up and we'll get it applied. Okay, so I've added a couple of coats of the paint onto there now. It is not an exact colour match, but you know, it's pretty close, and to be honest, when this sunroof is closed, there's no way you're going to be able to really see that anyway, so I'm not too fussed about that. And as I say, this is hopefully just going to stop the spread of that rust any further. So what I'm going to do is leave that to dry for a while. I have got some lacquer as well which I'll stick on, but that basically wraps up today's video. So yeah, a few jobs to do on the E30 today. Obviously it has been a little while since I've done anything on this car. I've been using it quite a bit the past few months, various bits of filming and just enjoying the car, to be honest, which has been great. So yeah, that's going to wrap up this video. I'll be back again with some more stuff I'm sure in the future. There's going to be plenty of things that need doing on this car. As I said, I'll eventually be doing stuff like a suspension refresh. One thing that I have got in mind is refreshing the cooling system possibly a bit later this year, maybe in the autumn. It's pretty strong, but you know, it's getting a bit old and a bit tired, and I do worry that some bits of it may fail at some point, so that's probably going to be on the list pretty soon. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.